All right, welcome everybody to OnPrem Pros. Today we're going to be talking about hypervisor licensing, and so I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Brown, and then joined with me is a solutions architect from xByte Technologies, Josh Moss. Josh, welcome. Every show I want to call you Josh or Mosh, but Josh Moss. So welcome. Today we're going to be going into hypervisor licensing, and specifically we're going to be comparing the license costs of VMware by Broadcom, Proxmox, and Hyper-V from Microsoft, part of Windows Server. And so to kind of help us out getting into that, we've created a little Excel sheet here for you. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that up here, and we'll walk you through all of the settings that we have. And so there's a lot to this, and so before we get into all the configuration, we want to kind of just walk you through it. This is a base config here. So we have a 3-node cluster, and you input your values in the yellow section. So you see me entering the yellow section. That's what it is, and we'll be making this available to anyone that can get into it. So here are some numbers you input in whatever your pricing is for things that you're looking at, or whatever vendors are giving you pricing on. And so you enter that into the pricing inputs, and here's where you enter in the actual details of the servers that you're comparing. And so in this game, we're doing a 3-node cluster, 2 sockets per server. And so that matters for Proxmox. And so we have the Proxmox here because they are per socket for licensing. And then cores per socket, that's for VMware and Hyper-V. If we get into any kind of HCI, especially with VMware, there's a terabytes or tibabytes, they call it. And Josh will get into what that means here in a few minutes. So we have that as an input. If you want to use HCI at all, you can say yes or no there. Which VMware license, so VVF or VCF. That's going to also impact your HCI. And then here's one we'll talk about towards the end, is if you want to include Windows licensing in VMware and Proxmox. And we'll kind of get into why that's a little caveat. And the last option is also if you want to choose Datacenter or standard licensing for Windows. And we'll get into what the differences are that as far as the impacts of licensing on Windows. So the first one, so you see here we entered into kind of a normal server, smaller cluster, and you're looking at the first line right here. We'll get into the VMware licensing. So Josh, do you want to kind of just walk us through how the VMware licensing works?
Yeah, so currently in the VMware by Broadcom portfolio, your 2 licenses options are VVF or VMware vSphere Foundation or VCF VMware Cloud Foundation. And the base licensing is done by cores, right? So there is a minimum of 16 core per socket. So if you've got a server with dual 8 cores, even though you only have 16 physical cores in that server, you do still have to license 16 per, or aka 32. So that's the base foundation of how VMware licenses. Like Ryan mentioned, there are implications when it comes to HCI storage and what you get with each of those licensing options as well.
Okay, yeah, and we have other videos that we get into some of the details on those differences. But so today, when you look at our analysis here, you're going to see this is the 1-year total, 3-year total, and 5-year total. And now let's kind of get into Proxmox. So
Yep.
Josh, we talked about the per socket. So how does the Proxmox licensing work?
Proxmox licensing is super simple. As the unit kind of implies here, it's per socket. If you've got a single socket server, you need to get single socket licensing for whatever term and whatever licensing tier you want. If you've got a server with 2 sockets, you do two sockets, same term and tier that you choose.
Now, the interesting thing with Proxmox is that it's actually open source. So when we put a price tag on here, it's the how much support you want to get. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it is a part of the open source community, meaning the code is out there readily available to inspect yourself. Any and all features that you could possibly want with the Proxmox virtual environment is included by default, even on the free version. What you get beyond that, whenever you pay for any sort of licensing through Proxmox, is 1, support for the product itself, and 2 is access to the enterprise repository for updates.
Okay. So we went with a middle tier for support. With VMware, your support's included in your price there, and what they've switched to. And we'll get into the Windows side later on as far as what that looks like for support. And so now let's get into Windows or Hyper-V. And this one's a little bit tricky. It's not this. It is core, but it's not the same at all as VMware. So Josh, how does that work?
Yeah, so contrary to VMware, like we talked about, if you've got that same dual 8-socket server, 16 cores, with Hyper-V, there is a 16 core per server minimum. So even if you've got the dual 8s, you still only have to license it, at least once, for that full 16 cores. And depending on whether you're choosing standard or data center, and specifically how many Windows server guests you're hosting, that'll really kind of drive you towards standard versus data center.
And I think we were talking. We did the math on that, because if you have on your server, how many VMs are given to you with just a normal license?
Yeah, so with Windows Server Standard, a 16 core pack on a server, that has 16 cores, you're entitled to 2 Windows Server guest OSs, and that is specific to Windows Server. If you're running any sort of Linux OS, you're not bound by that 2 VM restriction. That is specific to the Windows servers that you're hosting virtually.
Now, in this example where we have 2 sockets, each with 16 cores, so your total of 32 cores, so you have to add on additional licenses, and so you're having to add in. There are 2 core packs, and there's that we factored in adding into this. Do you get additional VMs per 2 core pack? Easy for me to say. Or what do you do if you need more than the 2 VMs?
Yeah, so if you've got a single server with 16 cores per socket, meaning 32 physical cores per server, you have to fully license that 32 core once with standard to be entitled to those 2 Windows guest OSs. And if you were to, say, need 4 Windows virtual servers, you would have to license 64 cores, because you have to license all cores twice. And to what you alluded to, there is a break-even point to where financially it makes sense to go to data center. Main differentiator between standard and data center is going to be with data center, you can host unlimited Windows server guests. Unlimited, of course, you're restricted by the amount of hardware that you have, but there's no restrictions on the amount of Windows Server guest OSs that you can host.
All right, so we see a lot of people going to that route because they don't want to worry about having to relicense every time, and you get unlimited VMs. So if you have dev environments or something like that you want to spin up, you can easily do that. So I'm going to go ahead and swap this to data center so we can kind of see that. And that definitely changes the pricing. So it is more expensive, but you're also, as Josh said, there's a break-even point. I think it's around 12-ish on the VMs, where it makes more sense financially to go ahead and just use the data center edition.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Now so we talked about with Proxmox, we said, okay, hey, we went middle of the road with support. So it gave you 10 incidents, and there's higher priced ones. So if you are looking at the Proxmox pricing and you want to change that price point to something higher, you can go ahead and the pricing inputs, we could have increased that. The VMware includes support. Hyper-V, it doesn't. I mean, we struggled a little bit to kind of find support for that. So Josh, can you give us a little background on what our options are if we want Hyper-V support?
Yeah, so when it comes to Windows Server, whether we're talking standard or data center here, there's a few different paths for supporting of the actual product itself. Obviously, updates, your cumulative patches, everything is going to be included, with the base licensing. But when it comes to actual vendor support, there's a few different paths. One, self-support, you can rely on good old Google and Microsoft KBs. Another path is going to be you can do a pay per incident with Microsoft, $500 or $499 if you're counting pennies, per incident. Another couple paths are going to be, you can get Microsoft Unified Support through Microsoft themselves. There is a graduated scale depending on what your Microsoft licensing spend is for the year. There are also a lot of third-party MSPs and Microsoft certified partners out there that will also provide support.
So on ours, I'll go back to our pricing inputs for a second here. And so this Hyper-V support, we actually found US Cloud was a big one they were advertising out there. And we found that they would offer, and this covers all of your Microsoft products, but we said it was running $25,000 per year. So you could also, as I think Josh said, go to the $499 or roughly $500 per incident. You can do that as well. And so if you want to kind of play around with some numbers here, you'd plug that to say $5,000 in. And before, where Hyper-V was just by itself, now all of a sudden with Datacenter Edition, with the incident and support, you see it's getting closer to the VMware price. Now, here's the tricky thing that we talked about this in the very beginning, is that if you are a pure Windows environment, even if you have VMware, you still have to license all of your Windows servers. And so you're going to need to include that license cost in any of your discussions. And so that's where you give an option right here to say, hey, yeah, I'm gonna include this because I still have to license all of my Windows VMs. I can't get away from that. So every one of those VMs is a Windows server and requires a license. And so we're gonna go ahead and say yes to this because we're gonna say we're a 100% Windows shop. Now you can see that the numbers change, and now all of a sudden, just if you think about it, if Proxmox has to include Hyper-V, it's all of a sudden the Hyper-V has to be the lowest price because everyone's going to be additive to it, and so that kind of changes it a little bit. Now, when you're looking at this, yeah, and it really does differ by company, I'd say. So for different organizations in this comparison, if you're looking at a $22,000 difference per year, that may make sense. Okay, people may want to save that $22,000 and take the chance, and because there is going to be some staff training, it's not, and you are switching, and you don't know if the grass is greener on the other side. So there would definitely be options for some companies where they look at this and they're like, yeah, I know VMware very well, it's working perfectly for us, and I'm not going to risk $22,000 a year in this situation. At least the price point would differ for everybody, but I'm not going to risk that to move to a different platform. It's not worth it for us, and we're going to stick with it. And so even on a 5-year where it ends up being $100,000, we break it down to just the 22 per year. You're like, all right, it's not worth the risk. So definitely each company, I'd say, makes their own assessment based on what features they want. So we gave you the financial analysis here, but I think really for each company, it comes down to then looking at the difference in price. Is there a difference in feature sets that you use? And is there a cost to retrain your staff and the risk of switching platforms? And the timing of that. Okay, how are you going to switch platforms and figuring out what it's going to take to actually switch the software? And so a lot of those discussions we have with companies to get into the weeds a little bit. I did want to include one last piece of this. We didn't really talk about this, and we'll throw it in here. Interesting twist to this. It doesn't necessarily impact the pricing piece of it. I'm going to say yes to the HCI piece because that does increase the price of VMware because you're paying on for an HCI add-on, and again, it depends. That all depends on how much storage you end up needing because you're paying for that. In this case, it's not a huge amount, but the interesting piece to it is that you see here on the annual HCI add-on for Proxmox and Hyper-V, there is no add-on price, and so I did want to spend a minute here getting into the HCI piece to kind of close things out. And HCI stands for hyper-converged infrastructure for who doesn't know, and that's where you're basically just virtualizing all your compute and storage and memory across all nodes. Storage and memory across all nodes. And so a lot of that piece is the storage side of things. So Josh, can you spend a minute here to just get into the HCI piece and why why, really, more specifically, why Proxmox and Hyper-V are listed at $0.
Yeah, so the use of vSAN specifically in VVF and VCF is highly encouraged. As a part of not only the product offering but the solution as a whole. VMware by Broadcom, they want you to utilize vSAN. vSAN is a great product. The way that it's licensed is with VVF you get 250 gigabytes per core that you license, or VCF it's 1 terabyte per core that you license. So especially incentivized in VCF, because if you're paying for VCF, you require those features. They want you to use it. As far as why it differentiates in Proxmox versus Hyper-V, so Proxmox, like we talked about a little bit ago, any and all features that you could want or need are available, whether you pay for licensing or not. The HCI piece is Ceph specifically. Ceph is also free open source software owned by IBM, aka Red Hat now. It's available on Red Hat as well as Proxmox. There's no specific cost to utilize that feature set. Only if you want support from Proxmox. And as far as Hyper-V goes, with storage spaces direct, or maybe Azure local, if you're looking towards that specific path towards HCI with Hyper-V, that's going to be included with your Windows Server Data Center. Specifically, you cannot do S2D on standard, or maybe your Azure local licensing. So that's why the cost is kind of different there. It's just simply how VMware is licensing the use of vSAN.
So yeah, so if you are looking at that as another factor to consider, and again, when it all comes down to things, as we said before, every company is going to be different. Your risk tolerance can be different. Your spread of Windows versus Linux servers is going to be different, and how much you value the price difference per year is going to be different. So definitely come to us if you want to have us do this analysis for you and walk you through kind of the gray areas. We're happy to do so. Just call us up or hit up the xbyte.com website and drop us a line. We'll be happy to get on the phone with you, Josh, or any of the other solution architects to kind of talk through what our options we have. So everybody, thank you very much for joining us today. We'll zoom out here and let you see our big heads for one last time in the big head mode. But thank you guys very much for watching, and let us know if we can help you as you make a decision about your different hypervisor choices. Thank you.